World War II was a well-documented and chaotic point in world history. Among the many stories to arise from that time, a perhaps lesser known but unique episode of European and Australian significance took place close to home, right here on Australian soil, in New South Wales, in the town of Hay to be exact. The town's internment camp 7 played host to civilian refugees. Over 2 instalments, the following article, contributed by Downey's member of staff, Matthew Thompson, explores the numismatic mystery surrounding this significant page in our history books. Alrighty, so part 1, ingenious internal currency. So to begin with, it's actually starting sort of at the end, which is what many collectors are familiar with, and these are the tokens of Camp 7, which were actually government issued. And you'll probably notice that the penny here is actually brass. There was also a copper issue, so there were 2 types that were issued, so you will also encounter that in copper from time to time. Alrighty. So prior to these government-issued tokens, the internees of Hay's infamous Camp 7 were freely exchanging their own private and unique form of currency in the form of Hay Internment banknotes. A complete collection of Camp 7 notes consisted of 3 denominations: a blue sixpence, a green shilling, and finally a red 2-shilling note. So you've got one of each of those here. And with the 2-shilling in really good shape, it's very, very hard to get and quite pricey as well. So they were designed by George Telsher, who was an historic customer of Downey's. When I was researching these notes, I asked a number of different people in the company just about them, because there's a lot of knowledge in the company, obviously. And it was actually, I think it was the auction manager of the time, mentioned to me that he was very familiar with George and he'd actually bought a couple of items from our auctions in the past. Now, unfortunately, he's no longer alive, so I wasn't able to get in touch with him, but just an interesting tidbit. Alright, so they were designed to facilitate a more sophisticated method of trade within the confines of the internment camp. The banknotes of Hay are a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of internees with limited supplies and assistance. These notes replace the small chits pictured below, of which there are fewer than 20 examples currently held in private collections. So the 2 denominations for the chits are the threepence and the penny. From most of the examples of these that I've seen, it's only the threepence that you usually see with Richard Stahl's signature on it. The pennies, for reasons that I'm not aware of, were most often blank. Maybe someone can enlighten me, because that's something that I would be interested to learn a little more about. So the Camp 7 banknotes contain several features which have been the cause of much discussion. Alrighty, so there's a couple of different areas of the note that I've highlighted here, and then I'll go a little further into each of those. So firstly, laid carefully within the barbed wire running along the centre of the note, the words HMT Dunera Liverpool to Hay appear. The HMT, hired military transport. Dunera was the ship on which 2,542 internees made the horrendous journey from Liverpool, England. So my understanding of the journey is that the conditions were quite bleak and they weren't treated very well at all. There was a short film that I found, I think it's called The Dunera Boys. I think I borrowed it from a library or something like that, and it depicted a pretty rough trip. And I also read articles, I think it was an account from someone, that the conditions were really, really rough, and there was a story of someone being made to walk over broken glass. So I'm not sure if that's true, but if it is, it sounds like it was, a really, really rough experience. So approximately 1/5 of the internees were dropped off in Melbourne, with the remainder bound for New South Wales, where they would be divided into camps 7 and 8. So you can see written here, we've got H, M, T, and then Dunera written there. It's a bit like a magic eye type of thing. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it, but it can be a little hard to decipher at first, but just take a bit of time and you'll get there. Alrighty, and then Liverpool to Hay. I think that picture hasn't loaded, so that's B, which will be here. That's in the lower barbed wire, just down here in the centre of the note. Alrighty, so next there's a a barbed wire border on each note, which features the phrase, "We are here because we are here because we are here," repeatedly. So Camp 7 was filled primarily with members of the Jewish community, some of whom had managed to evade a grim fate in the concentration camps. They were going about their daily lives before being shipped over to Australia, as it was suspected they were potentially German spies working for Hitler. So as a member of a race being targeted by Hitler, being wrongfully accused of being a German spy would have evoked a number of poignant responses. But this text seems to be a subtle and poetic nod to the nonsensical injustice that was taking place. Are you intrigued? Yada yada yada. We've got part 2. Don't even worry about it. Coming up. Alrighty, so just a little bit of a lead in. You know what you're here for. So let's launch in. So, in addition to the Liverpool to Hay and barbed wire features in the Camp 7 banknotes, there was another theory on the design of these notes that piqued my interest. Peaked? I should probably learn to say that word. Easy to write, not easy to say. Anyway, the idea that Telsher had hidden secret micro-printed messages within the inner border and possibly in some of the lettering of the notes. This theory got me really excited. I thought it was just unbelievable that something like this could have occurred and not been documented. But I think I go a little more into it here anyway, so we'll continue the article. Okay, so upon learning of this idea, I immediately put several high-quality examples currently held by Downies under the microscope for closer inspection. Now, this wasn't just any old inspection. I was looking at these for a good half an hour, trying to see if in any part of it there was anything going on. But I was disappointed to discover nothing more than aged ink. However, after several minutes, I was sure I had begun to see some obscure characters that were possibly resembling numbers or letters. Although I'm sure that if you spend long enough staring at any arrangement of shapes and colour, your mind will be able to come up with some fantastic theories on what you are viewing. Yeah, I was definitely one of those guys. I was just staring and I thought, oh, maybe if I squint a little bit, I can, yeah, but it wasn't the kind of thing that would have formed a legible message by any stretch, but I was still intrigued nonetheless. Alrighty, so it has also been suggested that the serial numbers on each note corresponded with an internees registration number. I'm unsure as to how this could have been achieved, given the fact that each denomination featured a different range in serial numbers. The 25 sheep that appear on the reverse of the notes each have names placed within the lining of the wool. One theory suggested each name belonged to a hut leader. However, I learned that each hut typically housed 28 internees, so if Camp 7 was home to 1,008 internees, there would have been approximately 36 huts. So this leads me to believe another theory, that the names appearing in the sheep are most likely a combination of friends of Telsher and other highly regarded internees. And I don't remember where I came across it. I saw it in a group somewhere, but I did see a list of all the internees, and that theory was correct. So I believe Telsher was actually in the same hut as a number of the names that are listed in the wool here. So a close-up of one of the sheep reveals the name of a famous sculptor and artist, Erwin Teddy Fabian, written in the fleece. Fabian resided in Hut 26 along with Telsher. He's also still actively exhibiting his works at age 102. I actually reached out to Mr. Fabian, and I ended up speaking with his assistant because I wanted a little more information on one of the characters. I'll get to that later on, but unfortunately I was unable to get on to him directly, although I did get a little more information. Alrighty, so there his name is. So, Teddy Fabian. Again, a little hard to read, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. I've observed the following serial numbers and suspect the notes were produced within these ranges. However, it's plausible that an unknown quantity may have been disposed of or destroyed due to printing errors and quality standards not being met. I spent quite a bit of time getting these figures, but it's one of those things where I'm sure the more time that goes on and the more effort you put into it, you could certainly broaden that. But I thought that was a reasonable estimation and based on the figures that I had heard from other sources, I think that was a fair starting point. So by September of 1941, these notes came onto the radar of the Australian government, who deemed them to be in direct contravention of Australian law. The primary justification for the notes' forcible withdrawal was their potential to be mistaken for genuine circulating currency outside the camp. Which is a bit of a stretch, right? Because if you look at the notes, it says here, the Camp 7 Bank, Internment Camp Hay. It's a bit of a stretch, but who knows? Anyway, so an order was made for the withdrawal and cancellation via rubber stamp of the notes, as well as the confiscation of the printing plates. It is now clear that several of the notes were souvenired by both internees and quite possibly the army representatives who were responsible for their disposal. Despite this, the notes are incredibly scarce and rarely available in higher grades, with only a few examples from each denomination having been cited. Even if Telsher was ambitious enough to include a hidden microtext in his notes, what purpose would it serve? After all, these notes were only ever intended for internal circulation. However, I haven't completely dismissed the idea that there may be aspects of these notes that have not been documented. And that's one of the many reasons I continue to be fascinated by the notes, which, despite only being in circulation for less than 6 months in a small community, continue to be sought after by collectors over 75 years after their withdrawal. So the key personnel involved were George A. Telsher. He was a designer of the notes. I believe some artwork may also exist that he produced. I think he did some sketches when he was in there. I may be mistaken though. Then there was Richard Stahl, who was the bank manager, and he was a signatory on all notes. He was also the signatory on the chit that you would have seen on the previous section. There was Herman M. Robinov, who was a bank clerk and an occasional signatory. W. Epstein, who was a bank clerk. And then M. Mendel. That was unconfirmed. I suspect he was a bank clerk, but the only information that I was able to get on him was from the assistant of Erwin Fabian, and he said that he spoke French very well. So, do with that information what you will. And then there was Andreas Eppenstein. I may be butchering the pronunciation, but I'll have a crack. And his name is printed in the fleece of the sheep on the obverse. So he was the camp leader. So his name takes a very prominent place in the fleece of the single sheep, which appears on the coat of arms design, which is this one here, which appears on all notes. Alrighty, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, I think these are a really interesting part of Australian collecting history and something that I will continue to research more. And if you have any further information or anything that I haven't covered off in here, feel free to get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.